Welcome. Emotions are everywhere. So how can we be smarter with our feelings? The answer is emotional intelligence, or EQ. We're delighted you're watching, because at 6 seconds, we're working towards 1 billion people practicing the skills of emotional intelligence. Can we count you in? Here on 6 Seconds channel, you'll find practical skills for work and life, inspiration for today, and support to build a better future for all.
Hello, welcome everybody. We're delighted to have you back on our weekly EQ show. Have you noticed that in times like this, emotional intelligence has become even more important? And apparently you did, because you're here today. And we would like to welcome you to this week's panel. Today we're going to have 2 panels in a row. This first one that I'm delighted to introduce you to is called Embracing All Emotions. And we're going to talk about how every feeling, every emotion is valuable and carries important information for our decision making and the things that matter. And the second one is going to be a panel entirely composed by Gen Z speaking on mental health. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Joshua Friedman, our moderator for the day.
We could have further ado.
Further ado, yeah.
Further ado. Welcome, everyone. My name is Josh Friedman. I'm the CEO of 6 Seconds, and we are thrilled to see you here. I'm seeing in the chat a bunch of familiar names. Thank you for coming back. It's great to be with you. And if you're new, well, please introduce yourself in the chat. And one of the things that's very cool about our EQ show is we have people from all over the world. Hi, Nitin. Hi, Kevin from Sri Lanka. And yesterday I learned how to say Mupseng. Welcome, Mupseng from South Africa. And Prima Adi, I haven't seen you in such a long time. It's great to welcome you back on the show. It was years ago that we were together in Jakarta. Oh, so many. So it's fantastic to see so many people joining from all over the world. We have Switzerland and Santiago and San Francisco Bay Area and exotic locations like Virginia and Jacksonville. So it's great to have you here from all over the world. And we're here to talk about emotions and making friends with emotions. And one of the things that I've discovered in working literally all over the world is that fundamentally people are the same. There's a huge amount of cultural difference and variation and ways that we're unique. But underneath that, emotion is the universal human language. I'd like to start by asking you all in the chat to share with us, or if you're watching the recording, in the comments to share with us, what's one thing you're curious about emotions? And while you're working on that, I'm going to invite our panelists to come on, and we have a fantastic group here to talk about emotions. We have some new friends and some old friends. And panelists, what I've noticed is that so often we say to ourselves, oh, I feel this, but I shouldn't feel so blah, blah. You know, and what if all our feelings actually have value? It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And in order to change the way we deal with our mental health, perhaps we need to start by dealing with the way we talk about emotions and making that just a normal thing. So I would like you to introduce yourselves 30 seconds each and just give us one emotion that you are working to make friends with. So one that maybe is not so easy for you, or interesting challenge for you to make friends with. Warren, could we start with you, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh. And thanks for inviting me to be on. I'm Warren Phillips, and I'm a psychologist, clinical psychologist here in Iowa, and do a few different things, wear a few different hats. I run a fairly large clinical practice with a variety of mental health professionals, and then teach at the Iowa State University in the psychology department, and run a organizational consulting business called Transformative Workplace Solutions, where I'm a preferred partner with this amazing organization, 6 Seconds. And, you know, Josh, in terms of sort of an emotion that I'm trying to make friends with, I would say lately, probably the last couple of months, that emotion would be overwhelmed. That's the one I'm trying to make friends
I
with.
think we can all relate to that one. It's hard to be friends with overwhelmed these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mucha, how about you? Whoops, you're muted.
You have to unmute.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Oh, I did unmute myself. All right, let's try that again. My name is... I keep unmuting and then finding myself muted again.
People are trying to help
Okay.
you, I think.
Hopefully this one works. My name is Mucha Mlingo. My name is Mucha Mlingo. I'm really excited to be on this panel today. I'm a preferred partner in Nairobi, Kenya. I am a self-professed emotional intelligence fanatic, and I am on a mission to transform my beautiful continent of Africa and help individuals to really create the future they want and leveraging the skill of emotional intelligence. An emotion that I'm grappling with is uncertainty. My personality is such that I like to know what I'm doing next, what's coming next. And so uncertainty is the one emotion that I am trying to make friends with and tap into. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Thanks, Mucha. How about you, Gabrielle?
Hi, Josh. Thanks for having me. I'm Gabrielle Magid. I'm the founder and CEO of Stronger Than Stigma, which is a 501c3 nonprofit headquartered in Jacksonville, Florida, and dedicated to mental health advocacy for millennials by millennials. So we're all about breaking down the barriers that keep people from reaching out for help and helping them feel comfortable in their skin and recognizing that they're not alone, and asking for help is a sign of strength and not a weakness. We've been really busy this month as it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we launched this 31-day virtual event marathon. And so every single day we've had something fun and exciting going on. I'm really excited to be here with you. I would say that emotions are a weird thing for me. I feel very in tune with feelings, and yet I feel like I have a hard time naming them. And anytime that I start with a new therapist, I feel like I always get a printout of a list of feeling words, and none of them ever feel like they match what I'm feeling. So I think I would say that overwhelm is definitely resonated when Warren mentioned it. And I think also this feeling of not being enough or not doing enough, or needing to do more. I don't know what the name for that feeling is, but that's what I'm working on.
Thank you, Gabrielle. How about you, Clover?
Hi, guys. So first off, I can relate to everything that all of the panelists have just shared 100%. So my name is Clover Hogan. I'm a 20-year-old climate activist and the founder of an organization called Force of Nature. Our mission is to really support young people in stepping up rather than shutting down in the face of the climate crisis. So I've always been driven by the idea of how to mobilize mindsets and how to really wield much of the energy that comes up in the face of the climate and ecological crisis into tangible action. Because I think our instinct is sort of to shut down because it can feel so overwhelming. So a lot of what we do is really around understanding climate anxiety and how to shift from anxiety to agency. The past few months have been really interesting, and I've been trying to take an objective perspective to try and understand what's happening in my own psyche and with my emotions. And I think the big word for me would also be this sense of uncertainty. And I think that's also because, in the climate space, I've been working, for the past 10 years kind of on the front lines of this movement. And so I have a very clear idea of my own sense of agency and what I can do about the problem. And I feel like I don't have that in the context of COVID and this pandemic. So it's really difficult when there's that kind of sense of powerlessness and just feeling like the problem is so much greater than yourself as one person. So a big thing for me from the emotional intelligence side has just been kind of relinquishing and trying to let go of control and allowing myself to feel whatever surfaces without judgment. Whether that is vacillating between, the desire to make the most of this opportunity and work harder than ever before, or it's, waking up and not having any motivation at all. I think the big thing for me has just been about creating space for all of those feelings.
Thank you, Clover. And I have a slightly different question for you, Ayman. Got to mix it up here a little bit. And we've known each other for a long time. And so I want to I know you have worked very hard to make friends with lots of feelings. And but I want to take you back to before we met. And you were dying. And you realized that part of the reason you were dying is because you had not made friends with some feelings. What was going on?
Well, I'm Ayman Sawaf. I am an entrepreneur, businessman, but I love media, and coming out of my own personal healing. I'm an engineer, businessman, Harvard. I created great realities, and suddenly, somehow, when I reached my 30s, I was in a depression and a lot of health problems, and I thought that life is finished. But something led me to a book, I think, of Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. I read it, and for the first time, I thought that emotion. So one thing led to another. To make long story short, I discovered my emotions, and I was like surprised. I am super, super, super intelligent, but I found out how, not stupid, but how not intelligent I was when I discovered that half of me I didn't know nothing about. And everything they taught me about everything, but nothing about my emotions. So I got into healing my emotions. And then when I saw the profit that generated out of that change in me and how my reality changed, I said, how come they don't teach us this in school? So then I started a term called emotional literacy. We created a media company for children and families. We did many TV series in Los Angeles. And then 6 Seconds came, and that's it. When I got to meet them, I said, what the hell am I doing? What I'm doing? Let 6 Seconds do them, and I'll be their champion. So emotions had really, I am like all of you, fanatic about teaching social and emotional learning. I've been at it for 30 years. I have many stories how I personify emotions in my meditations. I have my anger, my fear, my jealousy, and they talk together. They give me advice, because beyond being a messenger, bringing you messages about what's happening in reality, the data we talk about, and beside the electromagnetic energy, the electricity and the magnetism it offers us, it moves into being a guide along the way. It becomes your friend. And basically, I have a board of advisors. My emotions are all with me every day, and I made friends with them, and I talk with them, and they give me advice.
Thank you, Ayman. Well, we have some great questions in the chat, and I wanted to bring this one up. There's so much going on for people right now, and I think a lot of people have mentioned things related to confusion or scarcity, fear, anxiety. Like, we're in this time when there's just so much going on. And I'm wondering, Warren, maybe you could start with this. What does emotional intelligence and actually tuning into these emotions, what does that have to do with mental health?
Well, for me, when I think about mental health is it very much is a journey, and it's a lifelong journey, and it's a journey that whether we like it or not, we're the main explorer of. And so with that in mind, emotional intelligence really is the tool. It's all of our tools that we use on that journey as an explorer. As we're able to tune in with some self-awareness, kind of tune in to what we're feeling, and, to just be able to ask ourselves, what am I feeling, and what else am I feeling, and what is that feeling telling me, and do I recognize this? And being able to recognize some of those patterns, that self-awareness is crucial. It's critical, and then informs our ability to kind of combine our emotions with our thinking for much better decisions. And for me, the other two pieces I would say that are really critical, I know in my own mental health, and just as I'm doing counseling and therapy with folks, is really helping people tune in to others' emotions and tune in to where other people are coming from, and get to a place where we can have discussions about feelings with each other. And then, having a sense, 6 seconds calls it our noble goal, but this idea of having a sense of what's important in our life, and being able to use that as a compass point. I know that's been a hugely important lesson for me personally over the last 10 or 15 years, is really looking hard at figuring out what is that compass point and how can it guide me. So I really see all of these emotional intelligence tools as being a critical part of mental health.
Thank you, Warren. A couple of you referred to, and Gabrielle talked about having sort of hard to pin down and actually feel the feelings. Clover, you talked about that shifting from kind of these things happening to you to agency. And, this theme of overwhelm. I think my belief back in the day was that emotions happened to me. And maybe I was almost like assaulted by them. It felt out of control. And so my strategy was to just push them as far away as I could. So, Mucha, how about for you? How do you sort of stay in when it feels so big and complicated?
I think that one of the greatest lessons I've learned is actually tuning into the emotion and moving away from judgment to curiosity. When I attended my first ever 6-second certification, I was a practitioner working in learning and development. And my idea was I was attending this certification so I could add another tool to my belt that I'd be able to use with my clients. And one of the things I mentioned to Jane, our regional director for Middle East, Africa, and India, was that entire week was for me. And it was for me because there was birthed in my mind this idea of emotions as data, as an insight. And so what's helped me to navigate the uncertainty, and to be honest, close to the uncertainty is a feeling of being overwhelmed, is actually just being able to pause and look at this emotion as an ally, as opposed to, as you said just now, Josh, where you're looking at an emotion and you're shoving it away or pushing it aside or ignoring it. Actually taking it out and picking it up and looking at it and asking myself, if this was a friend who was over for a cup of tea, what is this friend trying to tell me? And when I'm able to do that, I'm able to, first of all, dial back the intensity of the emotion. One of the things we like saying at 6 seconds is name it to tame it. So when I'm able to name what it is I'm feeling, it dials back the intensity. And then I'm able to take a step back and think through what insight can I gain and what can I do about it? Because the great thing about taking time to tap into the way you feel is you then are reminded that this is not something that's just, as you said, Josh, happening to you that you have no control over. Rather, it's an insight, and then you can decide to, navigate it as you will. So I think for me, that's what's been so amazing. And I think that's been the biggest highlight of my journey with 6 seconds, this idea that emotions are data. And I like to think of my emotions as friends who, like I said, are over for a cup of tea.
I see you nodding your head. And I also just wanted to get your input for Lorraine Iman. I know this is something you've grappled with yourself. We're growing, we're learning, we're changing. It's sometimes hard to have that self-compassion and say, okay, I wasn't before, but now I can do better. How do you do that? And if you could just do a short answer, it'd be great.
Please repeat the question.
Yeah. Can you say something about how to process grief of not being self-aware and self-empathic previously in our lives?
Actually, funny enough, today we've been dealing with the issue of grief, me and my wife, Ron. We are grieving the past. We are grieving. We realize that we're going through the stages of grief, but we didn't know what we are grieving. And we realize that we don't just grieve people or things, but we are grieving the past because we are entering a completely new world, completely new way of living. So the grieving part, as we know, it starts with always denial. No, it happened. No, it didn't die. No, it didn't go. And then, of course, it turns into anger or blame. Then it moves the 7 steps, as per everybody knows, then all the way to depression and then going out of it. So we are all experiencing grief, not only grief of people who are dying, our family members or our elder, but we're really experiencing the death of an old way of doing things, and we are grieving that. And it's really, really important to learn about grief, because you're going to go through it anyway, those steps of grief. You can do it consciously and go through it very fast, or you can get stuck for years, let it do its way without being conscious about it.
Thank you, Ayman. Clover, I want to come back to you for a second, and this thing that Gabrielle brought up about, it's related to what Ayman was just talking about, like kind of keeping a distance from feelings. And when they're so big, and I know you've grappled yourself with tremendous anxiety, and it feels so big. What do you do so you don't drown?
Such a good question. Yeah, so I've experienced anxiety my entire life, and it's very much ebbed and flowed at different points. I've experienced panic attacks and, just that real sense of inundation and kind of looking in the face of a tsunami of emotions almost. And when I first came into awareness of my feelings, cognitive behavioral therapy really, really worked. As some of the panelists have touched on it, it's, becoming friends with your feelings, or at least first getting some kind of objective distance from them, so you don't feel completely beholden to them and their own kind of whims. But I think, working in the climate space especially, I found myself doing this kind of mental gymnastics, and it really crescendoed late last year when my home country of Australia was burning. And it was so big and so enormous that I found myself just spontaneously breaking down in public. I kept bursting into tears, and I didn't feel like I had any of that kind of control because the feelings were so big and so enormous. And in fact, that was when I realized that rather than trying to keep those emotions kind of capped in a bottle, I had to create the space for grief, and I had to create the space for sadness. And I think we live in a society that has kind of commodified emotions. You hear a lot about positive psychology and how to be your best and biggest and brightest self. And we've kind of disallowed a lot of those darker feelings, which are really, really essential, because otherwise we're kind of anesthetizing ourselves to the problems, whether they're the big problems like climate change or the pandemic, or there are those problems that really affect us, in our day-to-day lives. So really it's what I've learned to do is kind of be okay with all of those feelings and get better at vacillating between them without necessarily surrendering or spiraling, but just naming them, labeling them, and creating the space for them.
Gabrielle, I think that's a great segue to your work. And I'm curious, it seems to me like people under about 35, when we start talking about emotional intelligence, they say, oh, yes, absolutely, we need that. And yet there is this cultural phenomenon that some emotions are positive and some are negative, and we should be happy. And if we're not happy, maybe there's something wrong with us. What has helped you make space for the conversation of whether they're darker or more complicated, or as Ayman sometimes says, there are feelings that narrow our attention and focus us on problems, and feelings that expand our attention? What's helped you make space for those more challenging conversations?
So I think for me, the challenging emotions and those big feelings came about. So I want to commend Clover for doing all of the self work and everything that she's just describing, and I think it's amazing. I wish that I had been that self aware 7 years ago. I'm only a little bit ahead of you there, and age wise, but I think that some of these really big dark feelings are scary because you sit in them and you feel like you're the only person in this hole, and you feel like nobody else can possibly be this kind of bad human for feeling this way when everything is going your way, and you have people that love you in your life. Like anything good that you have, you feel like you're ungrateful for, because you feel like, how could I possibly feel this way if all of these things are good tangibly that I can point to? And you can try all these coping mechanisms where you start a gratitude list and you list things down. And yes, it's a great exercise and it's a practice. So no, it doesn't work overnight. But when you continue to do it, you realize that, man, all of these things on paper matter. And even though I can't convince myself in my head right now, one day when I'm a little bit past and detached from this emotion, I'll be able to look back and see, man, I was recognizing it then. So I think that the scariest part about sitting with these things is feeling like you're the only one. And I think that what brought me peace was working to create this community and recognizing that I was surrounded by people who also were feeling the same thing. So I wasn't this terrible human for having these feelings, or for not feeling grateful all the time, or for, letting anxiety and depression take over. It's a human emotion. It's a human space to be in, and just recognizing that and learning to not judge myself, and not, it's one thing to have the feeling. It's another thing to hate yourself for feeling that way. And I think that you really have to be able to divorce the two of those things and recognize, like, yes, feelings are fleeting. They come and they go. You are not your feelings, and you're not alone in whatever you are feeling.
This is one of my biggest concerns about the way we contextualize emotions in so many cultures around the world, is that when we start talking about negative feelings and, somebody says, oh, Ayman, don't cry, big boys don't cry. We start sending these messages that, some feelings are good and some feelings are bad. And if you have the bad ones, there's something wrong with you. And I go back to this quote that I've shared on the show before. It's one that really helps me a lot, which is from Seneca. Let tears flow of their own accord. Their flowing is not at odds with inner peace. Warren, what's your advice on this?
My general advice would be to keep in mind that, kind of like everybody's been saying here, all feelings, there is no such thing as a positive or negative feeling. All feelings are there to help us. They're there to guide us. They're there to give us important information. I know there has been and continues to be a fair amount of not just avoidance of feelings for people, but a lot of stigma around mental health issues as well. And a lot of that, interestingly, is driven, when you look at the research, a lot of that really is driven by some sense of fear. And sort of this artificial creation of us and them, and that happens to them versus me or us. And in fact, the reality is there is no us and them. There's only us. And as we reach out, and I think Gabrielle was saying this, as we reach out to other people, as we ask for help, as we offer help, as we share what we're feeling and are curious about what other people are feeling, if we could all do that all the time, what an amazing world that would be.
I mean, I want to come back to you about anger. We've had a few people ask about this. Hamadi asked about this. Colonel Dillip asked about it, and others as well. I remember you're in Lebanon now. I remember we were together in Dubai quite a few years ago, and somebody said, I know that I hear you saying all these emotions are okay, but I get angry and I shouldn't be angry. What do I do? How do I get rid of my anger? And you've written quite a lot about anger. How do we make friends with anger? You're muted, Ayman. Ayman, you're muted.
That's an easy question, as I was saying. Anger's message is that there is something not happening the way we want in our reality. It's a call to take action. It's a call to take responsibility to correct the injustice. Once we recognize that it is anger, once we own anger, that it is our emotions, not other emotions, this way we can use that electromagnetic energy and the data within it, and then we express our anger on the spot if possible. Close your eyes, imagine that person, feel the anger, just squeeze it, just close your eyes and do whatever you need, just get that out of the system. And then what's going to happen right away, that anger is going to turn to courage, the courage to correct the injustice, and then to passion. The other side of the coin of anger is passion. There are techniques when you express that anger appropriately, privately. You don't need to go and tell anybody you're angry at them. You need to release that energy because it's in you, it's yours. And then suddenly it's going to transform by itself to the courage to correct the injustice, and that's why I'm angry about. And then it turns to passion. In dictionary, it says anger, comma, blah, 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 comma, passion. When people speak in the Middle East or in Italy, they speak like you think they're fighting, they're angry, but they're passionate. So anger tells me that, when I get angry, there's a message, like what's not going right, what's happening in my reality. And as I express the anger, let it out completely, appropriately, you see the passion and excitement all coming back again, and it moves me to correct what happened and become much more than it is.
So this piece about owning it, this is my feeling, nobody's making me this. And I remember as a parent of a young teenager, often having this thought go through my mind, he's making me angry. And Mucha, I know you, in addition to your work in the corporate sector, I know you work with parents and young people. What I found was, actually, I wasn't angry. Actually, I was scared. And anger was more comfortable for me. It was more comfortable for me to get mad at my son than to be really afraid that he wouldn't be able to do what he needed to do. So what's your experience, Mucha, with anger and how we move through it?
I think that's, the key thing, again, and I think this has been mentioned already, is the idea that this is an insight. And the anger itself isn't a problem. There's no negative or positive emotion. It's information. It's what we do with that information that then, makes the difference. Speaking about working with children, in this season that's, my sons, I have 2 young sons and they're homeschooling, and they don't normally homeschool. So they're learning from home because of this, the pandemic. And, emotions tend to get away from us every once in a while. And one of the things I keep telling my son is that it's okay for him to feel however it is he's feeling. What he needs to learn to do is navigate that emotion. But the behavior that then is associated with the anger is what may not be appropriate. So I think what helps is also differentiating between the emotion and the behavior that is associated. A lot of times, especially from a parenting perspective, you kind of lump the two together. And so, the anger becomes a problem because of the behavior. So the reality is it's the behavior that could be an issue, but the emotion is perfectly natural. And what we need to learn to do is learn how to navigate. And that's for us as parents and then for children as well, helping them to navigate that emotion, helping them to know that that emotion is insight. And I like what Ayman said, that it's letting you know there's an injustice. So the question is, okay, so what can I do about that? And it's taking ownership of what you are able to do. I like what you said, Josh, that it's not someone making me angry. It is my emotion. What can I do about it? And that really takes us into, when you look at the 6 seconds model, this idea of choose yourself, being intentional and doing what you mean to do.
I'd like to ask all of you a 2-word answer. So big challenge here. The first word is a feeling that you've come to appreciate or has become valuable to you. And the second word is the gift that it's giving you. So a feeling and something that it gives you. And when you're ready, just wave. It's not such an easy question. And while people are thinking, those of you who are in the chat, I would like to challenge you to answer this same question. What's a feeling that has become a teacher, an ally for you? Maybe it didn't used to be, but now it's helping you. And what is the gift? Ayman, thank you.
I've been doing emotional intelligence for 30 years, so I've been through a lot and I've healed a lot. But recently, 2 of the things that I could never master was the sense of peace and inner peace and stillness. I'm always so hyper and all over the place. And in this,
I'm not going to say a lot about that.
in this lockdown here in Lebanon, in the forest, in the trees, watching the sea, we paused. And as I go in my meditation and explore the disruption and how we can serve the chaos and the disruption, I reach a stage of, my God, I can surrender. I don't have to do everything. I can relax. And suddenly that gift of peace and inner peace, I'm walking in the house like, Roman, I am so at peace. I just can't believe this. I've never felt that feeling before. Wow, wow, there's still more to learn. And I'm walking around Aslan, my little son. Aslan, can you do the peace with me? Like this? Can we be at peace? Come on, let me show you how to be at peace. When you learn something new, you want to go tell everybody about it, right? So I'm driving everybody crazy here. The gifts are, I can relax now. I don't have to do all that stuff. There's nothing to fix. There's nobody. It just relax. And the stillness that came out of that peace, that serenity, just so beautiful.
Thanks, Ayman. Clover, you got one? Gabrielle, you got one. Gabrielle, go.
So similar to Ayman, I think that, my 1-word feeling is gratitude, and the gift it's given me is a sense of calmness and security. I struggled with gratitude, I think, for a really long time, in that I knew that it was something that I wanted to be, and that I sometimes felt that I couldn't be or wasn't being, and had to step back from judging myself, but also always being aggravated by crying, screaming children at Disney World, because I was like, this is the antithesis of what I want to be. They're in the happiest place on earth, and they're crying, and their parents spent $100 to be what is wrong with them? So I never wanted to be that child. I wanted to master this practice of gratitude, because in my head, I'm like, I don't want anybody to associate with me with that screaming child. And
I remember having that exact fight with my children in Disneyland. We're in the happiest place on earth. Why can't you just be happy?
So, I think that, like I was saying earlier, it is a practice. And I feel like I'm finally in a place where I recognize that I do feel better when I recognize what I'm grateful for. And that calmness, I think, is what I was seeking from the get-go. And now I kind of feel at peace with it.
I want to just share a couple from the chat, because there's a lot of really beautiful answers. And then Clover, will go to you. So interesting. Anxiety is something so many people really struggle with. And yet it is about seeking. and then the connectedness we get from empathy and compassion. And this one, interesting, that discomfort tells us, I need to reach out, I need to connect. And those of you who are talking about anger, I've just lost it. Where did it go? That anger is a form of power.
Passion.
Yeah. And it's a feeling that's so hard, Paige, that insecurity and I can't do it. And yet maybe it's time to learn. Or, as Ayman said, to surrender. So those of you who are dealing with overwhelm, maybe there's a great teacher in that. Okay, I'm going to stop there and go to you, Clover.
Thank you. So I'm not sure if one would classify this as an emotion, but I suppose my word would be porous. And when I say
Wait,
porous,
say it again?
Porous.
Porous,
So
okay.
Yeah. Being sensitive. I think growing up, I was often criticized for being overly sensitive. And I think that's part of the reason I felt like I had to wrestle my emotions and almost like beat them into submission. And I think actually I've come to realize that my vulnerability is my greatest strength. And it's why I'm so passionate about the work that I get to do, because it fills me with such a sense of both despair and frustration and anger, but also opportunity and hope and optimism. So really, I feel that gift of sensitivity has been the drive of why I do it.
How about you, Warren?
For me, For me, I would say, if I think back on, some of the most important lessons I've learned, I would say sadness is one of the big ones for me over time. And, sadness has given me the gift of importance, understanding what's important, that clarity, and the clarity to perhaps refocus and change what's important. And sometimes it's been sometimes those have been very hard lessons, but some of the most powerful lessons in my life of, one of the things I do, and I make a very clear point of as much as possible, is letting people know how I feel about them, letting people know how important they are to me, how much I care about them. Occasionally people sort of look at me a little odd, but I've never had anybody like run away. So
Thank you, Warren. Mucha, what are your 2 words?
So my 2 words, the feeling is uncertainty, which is a feeling I mentioned I've been, working through. And I think the gift it's given me is a gift of introspection, peeling back the layers to truly understand why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. And to just really be able to name. The reality is often the loudest emotion is easy to pick up on, but when you peel back the layers, you find that there are other emotions that are beneath the surface. So I think the gift of introspection and being able to peel back the layers and pick out what else am I feeling, because I'm not just feeling uncertain.
Yeah. Well, there's so many more questions I want to talk about, and unfortunately, we're coming toward the end of our time. So I'd like to ask everybody in the chat, if you're watching the live, then you put it in the chat. If you're watching the recording, go down to the comments. What's the important question that you need to explore in one of our next shows? What's the topic about emotions that we haven't gotten to that is really important for us to get to? So put it in the, ideally in the comments down below the video on YouTube, or in the chat. And then I would like to ask all of you to take a moment and consider, if you were just to distill down this conversation to one Post-it worth of things that you want to remember for yourself, what are you going to take away as we're in this time of uncertainty, of sheltering, of figuring out what's next. What are you going to do with your emotions to help you in this process? Ayman, you ready?
So you asked me what would I do. I'm sorry, can you repeat again? Having a little bit of
what are you going to do? What do you, in just one sort of summary, post it, what are you going to do with your emotions to help you in this time?
Well, since I do not go anymore through lots of angers and fear and anxiety, I've done all of those years ago. And what I've learned recently how to conjure emotions at will. See, we think emotions happen to us, and here now I'm angry. Okay, great message, expression, electromagnetic energy, data. But I learned that you can conjure emotion at will. For example, as I was saying earlier about anger, once expressed turns to courage and passion. Now, sometimes I'm working on a project, and you do sometimes 90% in 5 minutes, and the last 10 minutes, the last 10%, you procrastinate forever, and you lose passion. So I've learned how to create passion. I would close my eyes and conjure anger at will. And as the old Egyptians, 7,000 years ago, knew so much about the science of the brain, they used to say 1 drop of joy over anger turns it into courage and then to passion. 1 drop of joy over fear becomes concern. 1 drop over concern takes it to a higher level of concern, which is compassion. So I've been playing with my emotions in meditation, trying, because once you feel one emotion, secrete, as we know, all the energies and the chemicals. But then if another chemical comes through, there's now a chemistry called alchemy. Like in chemistry, hydrogen plus oxygen makes water. They found out that joy, if you add to anger, it becomes courage or passion. So I would conjure anger at will. I would remember when my son gave me such a hard time, I was going to kill the son of a gun. Then I let that memory allow the anger to secrete. And then I would remember a moment of joy. When my publishers called and said, your book is on the best-selling list, I jumped on the bed from happiness, from joy. And now then I let that memory go and I let my brain secrete the joy chemicals. And together, I get out, I let them incubate, and 10 minutes after, like, let's do it. The passion comes back, the energy comes back, and you start attracting all the right people and you move forward. So emotions are electromagnetic energy. You can use them anytime, like electricity. You don't have to wait until the electricity, comes to you, So I think this is the next level of EQ. It's not just understanding emotions and expressing them and let them guide you and all that yummy, nice stuff. But can we understand this is not about psychology and being a good person? This is power. This is their energy. And if you learn how to recreate realities by changing our resonance, which is a mix of many emotions coming together. So this is the future.
All right. Emotional alchemy, part 2. Gabrielle, how about you? What's your post-it?
Okay. So, but I think you need to name another panel, Emotional Alchemy, because that would be really cool. I think my post-it, I heard a bunch of people say, I'm making friends with my emotions. And at first, when I first heard it, I was like, this sounds a little strange. I don't really get what that means. But I think that it also, the tone is what's really important there. I think that the idea that a feeling can be like cute and fuzzy, even if it's anger and something, that I might have judged as bad before. We're talking about like good versus bad and how we should just leave those words out of the emotional realm. So I think moving forward, again, continuing not to judge, to recognize that when a friend comes to tea, that I should welcome them and, then cheerlead them out if I need to. One of my role models just taught me that last week. So I think that, not judging and making peace and making friends.
Thank you. Mucha, how about you?
I love what Gabrielle was just saying, that when the friend comes to tea, you can also throw them out. I like that, Gabrielle. I think for me, I think for me, it's really emotions are data, and I mean, I don't think I will ever get to the point where that statement stops blowing my mind. Emotions are data, and we can, embrace all emotions as long as we understand that these emotions are giving us insight. And once we've received that insight, we don't have to be beholden to the emotions. I don't have to obey my emotions. I then have the choice on the action I will take. But I think, the start is just the fact that emotions are data, and I can embrace all emotions. Even those that make me feel uncomfortable, they are there for a reason. And if I just unpack what that reason is, I'm better able to make the choices that I want to make in life, and I'm better able to achieve the things I want to achieve in life.
Thank you, Mucha. How about you, Warren? What's your post-it?
I think my post-it would be, I would say, as an add-on to what everybody else has said, because it really is important to remember that emotions they're not an unwelcome party guest or a tea party guest. They really are powerful and give us really powerful data and information. And I think part of what I guess for me, my add-on would be, part of that data is to help me be clear on who I want to be and how I want to be. And just remembering, you can't always, in fact, often, we can't choose what life gives us, but we can choose who we want to be and what we want to stand for in the face of that. And emotions is a huge part of that information to help us make that choice.
Thank you, Warren. Clover, how about you?
So I'm going to be a little controversial and maybe throw something slightly new into the mix, which is, I think, often it can be a bit of a slippery slope if we focus too much on the kind of internal and not enough on the kind of external influences. And it's a trap that I found myself kind of falling into when I talk about, emotional resilience. And to focus too much on emotional resilience is to kind of neglect all of the pressures that are on us and how we choose to lead our lives in terms of the influences that we allow in, the people we surround ourselves with. And I think I saw a really great question come up around how to support young people in managing their emotions. And we have to recognize that there are so many pressures on young people to move toward these kind of extrinsic values around competition and comparison. And you see it in social media. Can be this really negative kind of vortex where you're constantly looking over your shoulder at the person next to you and how they're better, versus these kind of intrinsic values, which are really, really positive around, contribution and connection and community. And I've realized in reflecting on, being quite a sensitive person, being quite porous to a lot of these influences, that I have to be very conscious of who I surround myself with and the influences that I allow into my kind of bubble, I suppose. And I've definitely experienced a heightened version of that in the context of COVID. It only takes me about 15 minutes of kind of scrolling on the black hole that is Twitter to feel really, really overwhelmed. Because you're seeing these statistics and these numbers that you really can't influence. So I think just as much as kind of developing this emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and objective perspective on our own feelings, we need to be super conscious of what we're exposing ourselves to and how that kind of relates to our sense of agency and control in the situation.
Thank you, Chloe. I think it's a brilliant point about not enough, as Buddha said, to sit on the cushion and meditate, to sit under the tree. We also have to do. And our emotions are not just wisdom, they're also energy to help us do. So panelists, I'm greatly appreciative of your time today and your wisdom and your sharing. And we're going to kick you out and get our next panel in. And I'm going to just stay and say one word in closing, but I just want to appreciate that you appreciate all of you for being here and all that you shared, and look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What I wanted to end with before we go to our Gen Z panel is two thoughts that I had as our panelists were talking. One is, I think sometimes we focus on the loud emotion. We're caught up in a situation, we're in a pandemic, and we're reading the headlines or reading Twitter, and this one feeling gets very, very loud in our heads and hearts and bodies. And what I think is very important for us all to remember, in order to be emotionally intelligent, we need more than one piece of data. There's all of this information inside us and around us, and in people's faces and in people's words and in people's voices. There's such a richness of human experience. There's such a richness of data, such a richness of perspective. And so I think, as Ayman was talking about conjuring these different feelings, there's also just noticing, and noticing I don't just have one feeling at a time. And then the other point that I wanted to share with you in closing from me is, sometimes it's hard to name feelings as feelings. And with practice, we start to learn words, disgusted and annoyed and frustrated and vexed and peeved and regretful and doubtful. And, and these words start to have real meaning to us. But at the beginning, sometimes it's easier to use a metaphor. Clover used the word porous. Sometimes we can just think about being, spiky or soft, or loud or quiet, or maybe I'm feeling, like an oak tree, or maybe I'm feeling like a flower that's just about to open. And we can have lots of different feelings at a time, and starting to turn into this metaphorical language. The technical term for this is synesthesia, which is a fascinating topic of research if you want to explore. But this is how our brains work. Emotions are part of our metaphorical thinking. And in these metaphors, we find meaning and richness. And that can help us both understand and express what's going on. So thank you for being here for panel 1. And Tom, I'm going to turn it back to you, and then Hannah for panel 2. And I look forward to seeing everybody online or in the real world soon, I hope. But at least we can connect online. Tom?
Hey everybody, unmuting sometimes is kind of challenging, but thank you everybody for this panel. The conversation is so deep and so wide, so please let's keep it going on the comments. We all would love to keep going the conversation, and we'll respond to your ideas and comments on YouTube and Facebook. I'm also very excited about the next panel, but first let me give you a couple news about what's coming. I wanted to share this week's schedule really quick for Grow You, which is what this panel is part of as well. It's one of the 15 live online events that we're hosting every week. And as you can see, this week is a lot about emotions. It's a lot about harnessing the power and the value of emotions. There is a spotlight on coaching for our EQ Pro Club on Thursday. But there is a really interesting session tomorrow morning on shame, and a couple of sessions on empathy and navigating emotions. And then next week, we're going to have kind of an education focus on helping teachers and parents and all of us that are working with children to harness the power of social and emotional intelligence. But now I wanted to introduce you to the moderator of the day, which is not going to be Josh. It's going to be Hannah Bowers, and I'm really excited to hear the panel and welcome Hannah to the show with a little surprise, I believe.
There I am.
Hey, Hannah.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, what's up?
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah.
So I am going to be moderating this next second panel that we're doing. If you were here for the first one, definitely stick around for some conversation. It's perspectives a little bit, and it's super interesting. And I'm very happy and grateful to be moderating this panel and having this conversation. So here, I'm going to turn up my volume a little bit because I have some fancy audio equipment. All right. Does this help you guys? Great. All right. I'm about to get really loud. That's where the surprise that Tom mentioned comes in. So I was trying to keep my volume at a respectable level as to not shock anybody, but I'll control that. So my name's Hannah Bowers. I'm moderating this panel, Gen Z, Taking Action in Mental Health. And we have some amazing panelists that are all very active in mental health in their own unique ways. And we're going to explore all those different perspectives and their different projects and their different experiences together. And before I introduce them, I am also a singer-songwriter. That's what I do. And I'm not moderating panels on emotional intelligence. And I wanted to share this song that I wrote that is ironically enough called What I Wrote, or coincidentally, not ironically. And this is a song that I really believe in affirmations and intention and the power of words. And for me, in my journey in mental health, writing was probably the most powerful tool that I had. So this song is all about having the power to write your own story. So this is called What I Wrote. I don't mind being alone. I actually prefer it for the most part. Checking myself in a mirror. God, it feels so good to feel this beautiful. This beautiful. Oh, oh. Asking myself many questions. Where's the catch and where is the line this time? Oh, this time I won't mind it when I reach it. God, it feels so good to feel invincible. I can feel it physical in each and every note. It's what I wrote. Invincible. I can be impossible. It's not for me. Oh no. It's what I wrote. And if I write it, I might mean it so. Every day's a new impression. Taking my sweet time to get to know it. And everyone is interesting, but everyone is scared to get to know them. Let's get to know them. Answering important questions. Where you from and where you think you're going. Where you going? I don't know where I might go. I'll float until I lose it. And I love it, and I leave it. I'm living like I'm finally invincible. I can feel it physical in each and every note. It's what I wrote. Invincible. I can be impossible. It's not for me. Oh no. It's what I wrote. And if I write it, I might mean it so. Sit back down and learn another verse from me. It's not easy, but it's not hard to be. You're so stubborn. It gets so hot in the summer, and I get that you're uncomfortable. It's on fire for me. It's like every day's 100 more degrees. But don't fight it now, 'cause we're cooling back down. Invincible, I can feel it physical in each and every note. It's what I wrote. Invincible, I can be impossible. It's not for me, oh no. It's what I wrote. Invincible, invincible, invincible. You are invincible. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I'd be happy to welcome in my fellow panelists to get a conversation going now that that musical moment is gone. I will be looking out for you guys in the comments if you have any questions or comments during the panel. There's my lovely panelists. Hello, everybody. Go ahead, unmute yourselves. Welcome, welcome. I'm super happy to have you. I want to get to know all of you. Clayton, this is my first time meeting you. But the people that are all watching, let us know who you are and why this topic is important to you. So go ahead, introduce yourself and perhaps your role in the mental health space and why that means a lot to you, so the people can get to know you a little bit that are watching. And Clayton, I'd love to start with you.
All right, what's up, everybody? My name's Clayton. Right now, I'm going into my senior year at UNLV, and mental health has meant a lot to me. It still means a lot to me, because I think it's one of the most important things that anybody can kind of take on within themselves. And it's a journey that at one point in time, we're all going to have to go through if we haven't gone through already, because life is full of adversity, it's full of challenges. I think we've all experienced our fair share, but it's one of the most, I'm very passionate about it. It's one of the most important things that, I've ever kind of taken on in myself. And I'm happy to kind of share what I've learned and some of my experiences with you guys today.
Awesome. Thank you, Clayton. Sophie, how about you go next?
Hey everyone, I'm Sophie and I am going to be a sophomore at Duke University. Mental health is super important to me because I have been diagnosed with 4 different anxiety disorders. So obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and trichotillomania, which is a hair pulling disorder. And over the past couple years, I have gone through medication and therapy and rescued a dog and all of these things to try to help with my mental health. And I realized that the thing I needed most was another person to talk to. And I do mental health advocacy so that I can be the person that I wish I had when I was younger. And so it's really important for me to share my experience and be open and honest about what it means to live with a mental illness.
Thank you, Sophie. I love that sentence that you just said is something that resonates with me, that I carry with me in my life too, is that be the person that you needed when you were younger. I love that. Anastasia, why don't you let us know what you do? Who you are.
Hi, I'm Anastasia. I'm 17 years old and I'm a junior at South Lakes High School, and I am my school's co-president of the Our Minds Matter Club, which is a mental health club, and I also interned for This Is My Brave, which is a mental health nonprofit. And I run their Instagram account, so I manage a lot of their posts that they post about mental health for teens and everything. And I'm really passionate about this topic because I've seen a lot of my friends and family members, as well as myself, go through mental health struggles. And I also hopefully one day want to change mental health education in schools, because I think it's just as important to learn about mental health as it is to learn about history and math and English and everything, because I think that you can't really be super successful or super happy in life unless you know how to handle your emotions and help others and help yourself. So yeah, that's why I'm passionate about it.
Great answer, Anastasia. Ryan, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm 16 years old. I'm from Long Beach, California. And I started wanting to bring awareness to mental health from middle school, because in middle school it was a thing to bring stigma towards mental health and make fun of it. And so I made a video about mental health based on one of my friend's experiences to bring awareness to other kids without telling her name in it. And it helped me win a competition where now I'm a part of a project called Teens Dreams, which helps support the UN SDG number 3, which is good health. And so I'm a part of the Mental Health Hub, and I'm an ambassador for that project. And I also have brought NAMI, Ending the Silence presentations to my old middle school, to where other middle schoolers can be able to learn and not make the mistakes that we did in middle school. And so I just mainly do community-based mental health awareness, and I would like to spread that out more in the world.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So I want to start with this question because Anastasia and Ryan, you both sort of touched on this idea of at what age do you start learning about mental health? Anastasia, you said that we need to learn about it and it needs to be built into our education. And Ryan said, this was something that you experienced in middle school that you wish could have been different. So I'd like to first ask,
when you became familiar with mental health, like as a term, and then kind of your process in understanding what it actually was. I know I heard the word mental health before I really understood what it meant, I think. So I'd like to start with Anastasia, because you gave that answer about mental health and education. When was the first time that you were really introduced to mental health and kind of understood what it was and maybe why it was important?
I would say I was introduced to mental health in 8th grade because that was the first time I really started experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. And that was also when my sister was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. She was in college at the time. And so I heard a lot about what she was going through and how she started seeing a therapist. And I also started reading a bunch of these self-help books that my mom actually had. And so that's when I really started learning about like psychology and just mental health and what it is. And then when I entered high school, we actually started having emotional intelligence lessons in class, but they only occurred every few weeks or so, and no one took them seriously. But everything that we were learning in those lessons resonated with me and also reminded me of what I read in those books. So I realized what we were learning was valuable, but people just weren't used to learning about it. So I guess they didn't, I don't know, perceive it as anything valuable. So I really want to stress the importance of learning about your emotions and how to deal with them. And yeah, so to answer your question, I think it started around 8th grade, middle school. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then Ryan, what about you? When did you become familiar with that term?
Okay. For me, I feel like it's always kind of been in my family, like for mental health issues. But like when I was younger, I would know like things were happening, but it didn't really like was discussed towards me until about 7th grade when we had health class. But we only learned about like anorexia or food disorders or eating disorders. And so I wasn't really, aware of depression or anxiety or like any other type of mental health issues that some people may have until my friend who was really close to me, she dropped out of school, and it started becoming a big thing where people would make fun of having depression or like having anxiety and kind of make it a thing that either you wanted to have or you like completely hated. So that's kind of how I was like informed by it. It wasn't like a proper way. It was more like being ignorant. I personally like took it in a serious way and knew that was a serious issue. So I felt like I kind of had to teach myself about it rather than anyone else. And then when I came to high school, it's kind of similar to that, except for now we have one assembly each year where it's like a mental health assembly. But again, like as Anastasia said, you don't really, a lot of kids don't take it seriously. I know I took it seriously, but I wish a lot more people did. So for me, I do like a lot of presentations in my classes about it, trying to make it more aware without having like a teacher doing it. So it's kind of like that thing. But yeah, going back to the question, I started learning about it in middle school.
Okay, great. And I'm curious, based off both of those answers for Clayton and Sophie, especially because you also have college experience. Clayton, you are in university, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the resources that in the education that you had about mental health in school at any point, kindergarten up until you in college now. Do you feel like school is a place that teaches you about wellness and about mental health and gives you resources or provides a space for you to feel comfortable talking about these topics? And Sophie, let's start with you. Any opinion that you have on that?
Yeah. Well, first, just to say something to Ryan, you said something that was really interesting, which is that you learned about like anorexia, bulimia, and all these things. And I was thinking about, why do we learn about these things and not anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation, things like that? And I realized I think it's because anorexia and bulimia affect our bodies, and our society really cares about our physical health. And so when our mental health impacts our physical health, that's when we start talking about it, which is not how it should be. But that's why I think those are the things we learn about. But to go off of your question, Hannah, I think school should be the place where we learn it, and it's not, unfortunately, although I've had a lot better of an experience in college where there are so many more resources and people are really open to talking about mental health way more than they were in high school. I think there's a lot less stigma only because there's significantly more stress and people dealing with a lot more things. And I've always known about this term mental health, and I I'm still trying to grasp what it means. I think everyone's still trying to grasp what it means, just because there's so much research that we're still learning about. But I think college is definitely the place where we can explore ourselves and explore each other in a way that we're unable to do in middle school and high school.
Great. And then Clayton, what's your experience in that?
I would say I was lucky enough to be a part of, not necessarily in my school curriculum, but to be a part of a nonprofit foundation, the Inspiring Children Foundation, that really made an emphasis on mental health and showed us that it's okay to open up and experience certain things that maybe weren't, talked about as much in school. And now, as I've gotten older, well, especially middle school, high school, there wasn't really any space to talk about mental and emotional health. And I think that should be at the forefront of the curriculum rather than, I think math, English, all that is very important. But at the end of the day, like, you can be the smartest person in the world. You can be the most successful person in the world. But I think we all go to bed the same way. We all put our head on that pillow. And that's when we truly realize who we are. And if we don't have our emotional health, if we don't have our mental health, then at the end of the day, you have nothing. So I think that should be at the forefront. And then in college, I think it's opened up a little bit more because people are more aware of themselves and what's going on. And there are more resources that are offered in college for me than I ever really got in middle school or high school. But, like I said before, I think that should be the most important thing, that the first thing that we learn.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting that what I got from both Clayton and Sophie was that when you got to college, you got more resources and you got more safe spaces. But Clayton, as you're saying, your emotional health is the foundation. So why are we starting the foundation so late? So, and what it sounds like from all of you is that you saw this opportunity to use your voice and to take action and create change and create a conversation where you felt there perhaps wasn't one, or a perspective that was not being explored enough. So I want to get in a little bit more about the projects that you kind of took on and you ran with. And I do want to start with Sophie, because I think it is a really interesting move that you don't hear a lot of 19-year-olds. And I don't even know when you wrote this book, but because I know book writing takes a long time. So at whatever age you were, to say, you know what, I'm going to write a book. So can you talk about what that was like for you to make that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, writing a book takes a lot of time. I remember I was being severely bullied because of my OCD in 7th grade, and my therapist and I decided that the only way to deal with bullying was really to educate them. So I stood in front of my 7th grade class and I gave a presentation about what it's like living with OCD, what it's like living with anxiety. And all the people who had bullied me came up to me after and apologized. And I realized just how important it is to educate people and tell people that this isn't a quirk I have, this is a mental illness. And so I went home that day in 7th grade and I started writing in my journal, and this journal became my book. And I published this book in January of 2019 called Don't Tell Me to Relax. And it's all about my experience from, coming out about having a mental illness, to dealing with the stigma, to getting medication, to having medication not work, to going to therapy, to having therapy not work, to the point where, I thought I'd have to drop out of high school, and then how I went from going, thinking I was going to have to drop out of high school to becoming the valedictorian and going to Duke University. And then, my advice to teens and parents and educators. So that book took 4 years. And then that same year in 2019, my mom and I co-wrote another book called Overcoming Overthinking, 36 Ways to Tame Anxiety for Work, School, and Life. And we wrote the whole thing in 3 weeks. And I was like, how did this one take me 4 years and this one took me 3 weeks? But either way, both share a really important message about what it's like living with mental illness. And I thought it was really important to start shedding light on, the truth, because we tend to romanticize this idea. There's lots of, there's stuff in the media and in pop culture where we romanticize this idea of having a mental illness or being suicidal. And I really thought it was important to show the truth. And just like you, Hannah, I found the truth through my writing.
Yeah. Beautifully put. I couldn't agree more about the issues of mental health representation in pop culture. And I also know that Ryan feels equally as passionate about that, because her and I really got into a good conversation about that the other day. And
I did want to hold back on that conversation so I could hear now you really discuss that more, Ryan, about your feelings about, yeah, as Sophie says, the truth and how it's represented, and what we can do about that, basically.
Okay, so like we're going with Sophie, like the whole like romanticization thing, that has always been an issue for me. And in middle school, it was a thing for people to be like, "Oh, kill yourself," or "I'm gonna kill myself," and just like always talk about, "Oh, I'm suicidal," and that happens a lot because of the influences that we have in media, and just like it's kind of like a trend thing. And so people like make jokes about it, and they're very ignorant about it. So I feel like what I did to kind of help people understand, I know they're being ignorant about it, so I always try to like teach them about it without being disrespectful or mean. Just be like, hey, this is actually a serious issue, like people actually go through this stuff. And I feel like that actually helped a lot, because some kids would keep going on, but then when you sit them down and you actually like tell them like, hey, this happened to my friend, like this is actual thing that occurs, then like they actually realize they shouldn't joke around about that. So that's always been like an issue, and it has gone down since high school. I know for me, like you're talking about how you kind of stood up in front of your class and talked about it. I do that too in high school. I always do presentations in my class about mental health or like essays, and people are always like, "Oh, it's the mental health girl." And some of my friends do joke around calling me the mental health girl, but it actually helps people. I know this one girl, I was talking about something, she started crying, and but she was crying because she was happy that someone talked about it, because there's always someone in the class who probably has an issue and stuff. So that's always been a thing where like you kind of have to educate people out of that ignorance, because a lot of people just get influenced by the media or just influenced by that stuff. And so
Yeah, that's an incredible perspective, Ryan. Mm-hmm. And the importance that you both are stressing about the education, like you both stood up in front of people to kind of shatter this illusion of this is what pop culture or media is telling you that mental health is. This is what it is. I'm curious, either Clayton or Anastasia, I know you both do work with nonprofits, and Anastasia, you have a club that you are in high school. If either of you deal with that, with sort of like, how do you reveal the truth? How do you spread awareness? How do you educate about what mental health really is? If either of you want to take the reins on that question.
So the nonprofit that I work with, This Is My Brave, what they do is they basically provide a stage for people to perform live events in front of an audience about mental health and share their mental health stories, which can take the form of like an essay, a song, a dance, just any performance art piece. And when I got in contact with them, I started learning that they had a huge platform on Instagram. And so that's when I took I basically started managing their teen Instagram account. And I think I found that as a really useful platform to educate others, because I mean, most teens are on Instagram or have some sort of social media. So it's a really easy way to access them and post or repost both photos or quotes or statistics from other mental health nonprofit accounts, and just share information with a really, really large audience. So that's probably the number one way that I use to educate others about mental health and different mental health issues and what to do if you're struggling with mental health. Other than that, definitely running a club in school helps a lot, because I think it provides a very safe space for a lot of students to come to and feel comfortable talking about mental health. And yeah, those are basically the two main platforms that I use to educate others. Unfortunately, we don't really have a class on it, and I would love to give presentations in school, and honestly, you guys, Ryan, have definitely inspired me to do so. So if we end up going back to school, hopefully I'll be able to do that. But
yeah, if you end up being able to go back,
yeah.
More like when, and you definitely will, whether it happens in high school or you continue to do stuff like that in college. If that's what's next for you. So Clayton, and then what does that look like for you, spreading awareness and educating people about mental health?
So the foundation I was brought up in holds a very safe space for people to come and kind of just air out what they're feeling or share what they're feeling. And we've built kind of a culture around that has, I guess, provided a lot of wisdom to how people are feeling. And then, once I graduated high school and kind of moved on to my college years, I went to the Air Force Academy for 1 year. And that's a very stressful, highly, it's a pretty intense environment. And there's not a massive focus on mental health. It's more just like, next thing. So me and my friends started it turned out to be a mental health club, but it started out as just like a place where once or twice a week we can go to just like meditate for 20 minutes. And then, word started to spread around. People were like, okay, I've heard of this meditation thing. Like, let me go try it. And then at the end, we got like 15 or 20 people meditating with us once a week or twice a week. And then at the end of the meditation, we just kind of like go around in a circle and just ask a simple question like, how are you feeling? And then that would turn into, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. And then to the next person, or that would turn into, someone breaking down, crying, just kind of airing out what they need to. And then they would walk out of that a completely different person. So that was nice. We were able to kind of start that. But at the same time, I've realized you can take that with you wherever you go. So I've made it almost kind of like a personal goal or a personal mission to hold an open space for people or a safe space. And I've had full on like counseling sessions with people, like pull up a chair, what do you need to talk about? Let me try to provide some insight to how you're feeling, because, going through being so aware of kind of like the mental health aspect of my own life, I'm able to kind of understand and be aware of the thoughts that I have. And then I can relate that to how other people are feeling. Because I've been through a lot in my life personally, so I understand what it's like to go through adversity, to go through difficult times. So it's been important for me, and I think everybody can kind of take this role on, but to be a mental health advocate for others and kind of hold that space for other people.
Absolutely. And it sounds like all of you are professionals at creating spaces and holding those spaces for others. So I really commend you all for that. And I really wanted to go back to something that Anastasia touched on, because I mean, we could have a whole panel on this itself, but Anastasia said, social media is where everybody is. And so that became an opportunity for her and the nonprofit that you work for to talk about mental health. Is social media something that you have experience in creating that space there too? I know Anastasia talked about it, but for the rest of you, do you have any experience with that, or what are your feelings about how you've created these spaces in person for people, and then they're also all on the internet? How have you, if at all, you created those spaces on the internet? If anyone wants to jump on that.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So like for me, I tried to create challenges online for like mental health, because there's a ton of like organizations or just people in general who make hashtags for mental health. Like I know there's one going on right now among celebrities, and that's really cool. But I've tried doing that before and it didn't really work. But what I've done, I've noticed with just people in general, they do like to talk more on social media, just like talking about their feelings rather than in person. So I've connected with a lot of people that way, where they can like, share their feelings with me if they ever feel like upset or down and they don't feel comfortable talking about it in real life, and all those type of things. And like, it's just kind of like listening to them. And so it's just like that type of thing that I noticed has gone on more in social media, where you can just connect through like direct messaging. And so they feel like it's a comfortable space that way rather than straight out in the open. But that's all I've noticed. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is I do a significant amount of work as a professional speaker, and I speak a lot to parents and educators. And the thing they always ask me is like, how do we get our kids off of social media? And I said, you're asking the wrong question. It's not how do we get our kids off of social media. It's how do we teach our kids to use social media in a way that is healthy. And so it's shifting the perspective. It's not we need to stop people using social media. It's we need to teach people how to use social media in a healthy way, how to use social media as a support system as opposed to something that's going to bring you down. And I think that's a really important part of learning about mental health and learning about ourselves, what triggers us. And I think social media can be a great way for people to connect with other people. As Ryan said, people like to use, DMing and Instagram and all these things to talk about mental health. And if that's how they want to talk about mental health, there's nothing in me that wants to stop them. I think it's a great first step in learning to talk out loud about mental health. And if that's where they stop, that is totally fine too, because talking about it in any way is better than not talking about it at all.
Absolutely. Have the conversation any way that you can. So Anastasia, so you run the social media account for This Is My Brave. What kind of content do you create for that? And what does that space look like for people that might not be looking at it right now, watching this on YouTube? Also, if you want to throw out the handle there, that if they want to go look at it on Instagram, what to look for.
Yeah, so it's This Is My Brave Teens on Instagram. And basically the content that we post is I try to post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because like Sophie was saying, you just need to learn how to use social media in a healthy way. And for me, using it in a healthy way is also using it in moderation, because I personally can't be on there constantly because it's not that great for my mental health. And so yeah, I post Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And on Mondays, I like to share other people's stories. So I have other teen users usually who DM me their mental health story, and I can post their stories either anonymously or tag their account. And I usually receive a lot of comments on those posts because it's just really inspiring to see other people sharing their mental health stories and being very brave and stepping out of their comfort zone for the purpose of helping others and raising awareness. And then on Wednesdays, I like to post wellness posts, so anything related to exercise, food. I am really careful when I post about that stuff because I know that it might be triggering. But yeah, so anything related to wellness or even like meditation and journaling and all of that. Fridays are usually for reflection, so I try to post challenges and encourage my followers to reflect on their week, reflect on their emotions, what they can do maybe to improve their anxiety or something for the upcoming week. And yeah, just kind of take a step back, sit down, journal, maybe just think about how they've been feeling lately, what they can do to feel better, and anything that they need to address. So yeah, that's basically all that I post in the main feed. And then I like to post really either inspirational or just encouraging and uplifting quotes on our Instagram stories, just because, you know, people are tapping through stories all the time. And I think that when they see a nice, kind message, it does bring up some people's moods. So I just try to share as much positivity as I can through that platform, because I know that as someone who has a social media platform, you do have a responsibility that comes with it. So you should be sharing stuff that will hopefully benefit other people who are viewing it. So I always try to keep that in mind and be very aware of other people's backgrounds and also like of trigger warnings and everything. And yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing space. I try to follow a lot of those accounts too, because it's sort of like creating your world on social media. You choosing who you follow, and if you follow something that's going to make you feel better, that's an act of self-care right there. Social media self-care. So what I also wanted to talk about is we're talking about normaling the conversation, right? Creating these spaces where you can talk about mental health and making mental health not scary and shattering the illusion. And I think a large part of that is normalizing feelings that maybe we don't like feeling. And I want to ask Clayton your perspective on that. How can we talk about feelings that might be uncomfortable for us, that people try to avoid, and how can we embrace those? That was the title of the first panel that we had this morning, was embrace all your emotions. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, I would say if you want to start having that conversation with somebody, it has to start coming from you. Because if you are willing to open up and be vulnerable, I think that will trigger something in the person you're talking to or in others to feel that you can hold that safe space to, let them be open and vulnerable. So I think first of all, that starts with you, and you can take that anywhere you go. And it's important for me, especially there's like a lot of small talk, hey, how's it going? Good. How are you? Okay. Like kind of move on during your day, or like, what shows you been watching on Netflix? Oh, did you see, what latest celebrity gossip? It doesn't really matter, but that's stuff that, doesn't have that much depth to it. But if you're willing to take that conversation to another level, like, how are you actually doing? How's it going since your, parents got divorced? How's it going since your dad passed away? Things like that. And you start by opening up yourself. I think that makes people feel way more comfortable opening up within themselves. And then that can kind of spread. It only takes one conversation with one person. And then maybe it's like, okay, that person feels more comfortable to be open and vulnerable. because they understand that they're not going through the struggle alone, that these feelings that they're having aren't necessarily bad. It's just something that everyone goes through, and it should be normalized. So I think going back to my main point, it kind of starts with you.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Absolutely. Sophie or Ryan, do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in and say I think it's super important that the way we normalize mental health is by changing the language we use to talk about it. So we know physical health is normalized. Like no one has a problem saying I went to the orthodontist or I broke my ankle. So why is it different saying I have anxiety or I went to my psychiatrist? It's because of the language that we use to talk about it. So we say things like mental health issues and mental health problems. And when we use these words, issues and problems, they're very negative. They have a negative connotation and that creates stigma. And people say it all the time. Even mental health advocates say mental health issues, mental health problems. And what's important to note is that when we talk about physical health, we don't say like someone has a problem with cancer or an issue with diabetes. We just say what it is. We use very neutral language. And so I think it's really important for us to normalize the conversation by using neutral language when we talk about mental health. So saying things like mental illness or mental health challenge or mental health concern is a lot more neutral than saying things like issues or problems or someone suffers from anxiety, someone struggles with depression. If you replace those words, struggle and suffer, with someone experiences depression or someone was diagnosed with anxiety, I think it really opens up the conversation and makes it a lot more accessible to more people.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much for saying that. Someone needed to say it. I'm glad it was you. And that's a great technique that we can use in everyday language. It's like we don't necessarily, I mean, it's great when we stand up in front of people and we give a presentation, but these are little things that we can do every day that make the communication surrounding mental health so much more natural and so much more effective. Ryan, do you have any opinions on communication?
Yeah, so like as I've been saying, I feel like I try to educate people and like just trying to normalize it that way. But even for me, like if someone like is trying to talk to me and ask me how I'm really feeling, I start like getting really nervous. I start breaking down or something because like, you know, it's scary even for me to talk about it because I feel like it's just not normalized like that yet. I really like what Sophie's saying. I'll like take that into account of my life now because that's actually a good point. But yeah, I definitely think that when you're talking to someone, definitely use certain terms that won't be, you know, triggering or make others upset, just like the whole mental health issues and like kind of changing that. But also make sure you're talking to someone that, you know, you care about, or maybe if like when you're talking to them, like there has to be like empathy in between it. So then like is more understanding, because I know that sometimes when I talk to people, what happens, it's kind of becomes like more of a therapy session. And I know some people might like that. I know some people might hate it. So it's kind of just having to find that whole entire balance of it all. Of, you know, do I just listen or do I try to help them like solve a little certain problem they may have? Like there's all these different components into trying to change how to have a conversation about it or something like that. If you're like actually talking to someone with mental health thing, sorry, I forgot what the term I should use, or if you know, you're just talking to someone trying to help them understand it and like using better terms to use it.
Great, thank you, Ryan.
And just really quickly, something based on what Ryan said, which is the idea of do I listen or do I try to help and problem solve? And what I like to talk about a lot is this idea that you need to meet them before you move them. So a lot of the time, what we do when we're trying to help someone is we try to fix and problem solve and move them to a better situation. And that's because we don't like dealing with negative emotions. That's not because they don't like dealing with negative emotions. And so it's really important to meet them where they are. So saying things like, this must be really hard for you, or I'm so sorry you're dealing with this, instead of saying, you're going to get over this, just relax, you're fine. We don't want to move them. We want to meet them where they are in their emotional state so that they can learn to trust us and have a more open conversation.
Beautifully put. Yeah, about being present and what the situation is. So like what I posed to Clayton is coping with what is and not trying to solve what is. So something that I was really curious to ask all of you that I think is important in relating to even just Ryan finding inspiration in something that Sophie just said in what Sophie was talking about earlier about poor portrayals of what mental health is in media, in social media, and how do we represent something positive about what mental health is. I'd like to pose all of you, whoever wants to answer this question first, do you have any role models that you feel are good people to, I want to direct it in the space of mental health, but maybe it's not necessarily like your mental health role model, but like your role model and how their approach to mental health helps you with your own. If any of you have an answer to that question, it was something I was really curious about.
I personally think one of my role models is the woman who runs This Is My Brave, Jennifer Marshall, and just anyone really who's working in the mental health space and with mental health nonprofits, because what I found with them is that those people are super transparent with their struggles or the things they've overcome or when they're having a bad day. And I was really attracted to that because I think for the longest time, I personally was a perfectionist since I can remember. And so I always thought that I always needed to have a happy face on and that I couldn't show any sign of weakness or that showing emotion was a sign of weakness. And I just learned to be vulnerable from them and to be transparent and know that transparency is not a weakness at all. It's actually strength. And yeah, I think that anyone who's working and is a public advocate of mental health is definitely one of my role models, because I think that it takes a lot of courage to do that and to speak up for people who might not be ready yet to speak up for themselves. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
Wait, can I talk? Okay, sorry. But for me, one of my mental, so I've always been into media, all that thing. I want to get into media in the future. And one of my role models are usually have been YouTubers. One particular, his name's Connor Franta. And I've been watching the same people as I've grown up and have they grown up. And I've been watching him grow up as a person because he's to LGBTQ plus community, and I'm not, but I like seeing how much people from that community and from just in kind of the industry community as well kind of grow, because their whole entire life is kind of put on to social media and all this stuff, and we're growing as a generation to be on social media, to be on these type of platforms, and it's really hard for them. And I like that people are using their big platform, like Connor is, like any other person is, to kind of talk about these topics, or to show their experiences and not be afraid to just stand up about their mental health and just be like, it's okay to feel this way and all those things. So I always looked up to those people because that's the people I've grown up to know.
Awesome. Go ahead,
sorry.
Sophie, run with it.
Yeah, I think for me, my role model is Pamela Schuler, and she is a comedian and mental health advocate, and she founded the organization Here Now, which is a teen-driven Jewish organization. And I think the thing that always draws me to her is that she's a comedian and she talks about having Tourette's and having OCD, and it's just amazing to me that she can find the funny and the shitty, because people tend to separate the two, and she puts them together and really shows the truth about what it's like living with Tourette's, what it's like living with OCD. And she also consistently posts about when she has good days and when she has bad days. I think a problem that a lot of mental health advocates have is they post just when they have good days, and that's not realistic. So she is very realistic in what she posts. And also, the biggest influence and role model for me is my mom, because when I told her that I thought I had OCD, she actually told me that she has OCD as well. And I realized then that it was very possible for me to be successful, because she is a highly successful person. And I didn't realize that mental health and being successful weren't mutually exclusive. And so she's the one who really taught me that.
Yeah, that's an amazing balance between, well, not even a balance, it's just intertwined success, mental health. And another one that you said that I think is really important is humor. Being able to be funny, even though maybe things aren't desirable. So you don't have to, and not everything has to be peachy keen for you to laugh about it. And then Clayton, I'd love to hear your answer to the question too before we move on.
I would say the founder of the Inspiring Children Foundation, someone that I grew up around a lot, Ryan Wolfington. I draw a lot of inspiration from him. just because of the way that he lives his life and that he's such an advocate for the truth. And he lives that, he doesn't just preach it, but he truly lives it in a very disciplined way. He wakes up, he meditates, and then he goes throughout his life following just, purely through intuition. He tries to just kind of detach from the mind and all like the chatter that goes on. And he's like a hardcore advocate for the truth. And sometimes he'll give it to you straight. Sometimes he'll be more soft, more empathetic, but he's someone that I've really drawn a lot of inspiration on. And my brother as well, because he's really taken on that journey in himself. And through discovering himself, he's been able to grow his wisdom and his knowledge and pass it on to others. So I'd say those two guys are my inspirations.
Awesome. It's so great to talk about these things. I think it inspires all of us to hear what inspires somebody else. And then we can broaden our network to, hey, that sounds like a really cool organization or a really cool person that I could also look up to too. And you also mentioned something a few times about how meditation has been helpful for you and Clayton. And I just want to talk just briefly. We are running out of time little by little here, but I want to talk about coping mechanisms for a second. What coping mechanisms work for you or work for people that you're close to that you feel really excited about?
I can talk about this. I have my coping mechanism, like usually I get like really stressed or anxious. I tend to clean my room a lot. I like to make sure everything is organized, and because if I feel like if everything's organized, then I feel less like there's less clutter. So I just feel like I can, do stuff with ease, if that makes sense. So I literally will clean every single inch of my room, and it's not like a thing like I always repeatedly do. It's just kind of like a thing that helps and it makes me calm down. And also I like to talk to my mom. I like to have conversations with my mom, and usually I'm like in my room. Most of the time I like going downstairs to my mom, being just like, hey, how are you? I feel like that just like relieves my stress, being able to communicate with someone, especially right now. All I have is kind of my family around me. And so just being able to talk to them like, oh, how are you? I like listening to people, and we can like just talk it out how we're feeling. Yeah.
I think mine, could I share?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the two coping mechanisms that are most used for me are meditation and also working out, because I actually used to be a tennis player. I stopped after I got like 2 simultaneous injuries, but I was so used to constantly working out and just getting that endorphin rush. And I still use that as a coping skill now. So I go on a run or just do a little home workout. And then meditation is more of a preventative measure, I think, just because I don't really usually go to that if I'm having a really bad day, but it's something that I try to do every day to prevent one of those bad days from occurring, or at least occurring as frequently as they used to. And I just find a lot more like serenity from doing both of those things, and I would highly recommend both.
I think for me, one strategy that I use is I have this idea that you need to name it to tame it. So whenever I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling, I don't say I don't know how I'm feeling. I actually have a chart of words that I have, and I say let's pick one, because once I pick one and once I can name how I'm feeling, I can more easily control it. And also, the less serious one, but I do actually do this, and it's disgusting to a lot of people, but I tend to watch like Dr. Pimple Popper and like earwax extraction videos, which is like really gross to a lot of people. But I think like something about the relief of, having the pressure relieved comes inside of me as well, and relieves some of the stress that I'm feeling.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I know plenty of people that feel the same way about that. And that was inspiring. Clayton.
That's pretty funny, by the way. And also Anastasia, that's cool, because I play tennis in college right now, so I didn't know we had that in common, but that's pretty cool. I would say the two things that I really take into account in my life is meditation and journaling. Meditation, because that's definitely a daily practice I've incorporated in myself. It's the first thing I do when I wake up. I'm not going to leave the house without it, because it kind of, when you're in like the stormy sea, when you're in the choppy sea, it kind of allows you to elevate yourself and see, not just be caught in the washing machine of just like, all these crazy thoughts, and it can kind of spiral into negativity. But it helps you kind of get like a bird's eye view of kind of everything that's going on. And then it helps you realize like, okay, that's not necessarily me talking. That's my mind talking. That's like the negativity talking. And it allows you to see that and let it go. And I think that's helped me a ton, because the mind, it finds ways to trick you, but in reality, it's going to give you the same things. Like, no one likes me. I'm fat. I'm ugly. I'm not good at this, blah, blah. It kind of always spits the same thing at you. So meditation has been a huge key factor for me, probably number one. And two, journaling helps a lot, because I'm more of a listener as well. So it helps me to kind of, if I'm going through something, just even recounting the day, seeing that on a piece of paper, it kind of gives me the same thing as meditation with the bird's eye view perspective, and seeing that, okay, this is what I experienced, and then it allows me to sit with it a little more and realize that, it's just kind of my mind talking. So those two things really help me.
Awesome. All of you have great coping mechanisms. That's amazing. We are almost out of time, but to close out this and just kind of wrap up everything that we talked about, because we touched on so many topics today. And I just want to reiterate again, I'll just keep saying it forever, is just, you're all so awesome. And I'm so happy to be here with you guys right now. One thing that I want you all to do before we go is, if you could just a short statement that is something that you heard that you really liked today, that's something that inspired you, or an action that you feel driven to take after today, sort of like a major takeaway, something that resonated with you in this conversation today, whether it's a thought or an action or whatever feeling. I just want to hear everybody's takeaways.
I'll go first on that one.
Great.
I would have to say Sophie. I really like the meet them, don't move them. That was something that resonated with me, and I think that's a great, it sounds nice coming off the tongue, and I think it's totally true. So meet them, don't move them. I'm definitely going to take that with me. And then I just like to say it's awesome seeing, kids around our ages, especially so young as 16, Ryan. Like, it's impressive to see what you've taken on in yourself, and, the message that you're trying to spread, because of how important it is. So props to everybody here, and thanks for having me on this call.
Thank you, Clayton.
I can go next. So I actually liked what Clayton said in the beginning. It was about, no matter how successful you are, or how happy your life seems to be perceived as, we are all the same person when we lay our head on the pillow. And you really have to think about that when you're talking to a new person or seeing someone on social media. So I think that's something that not only I should take into account, but everyone, because that's always an issue. You see someone as something else, but they may be something else. And yeah, so I really like that.
Thank you.
I also want to jump in and say the thing I'm taking away from this is definitely something that Clayton said, which is get a new perspective, look at it from a different angle. So I like what you said about journaling and meditating helps you see it from a bird's eye view, and sometimes just having a new perspective and seeing it from a different angle is all you really need.
I really liked what Ryan had to say. Something that popped out to me was that you were saying how some people refer to you as the mental health girl. And sometimes I feel the same way about myself sometimes. And I even think that, am I talking about this too much? Am I raising too much awareness? But I mean, obviously there's never too much awareness. So I guess just embrace the fact that I'm really passionate about this. And honestly, it's a really great issue to be passionate about. So yeah, this whole thing just inspired me to continue doing what I'm doing. And yeah.
Am I raising too much awareness? I love that. And thank you for saying that about.
One more thing to say.
Yeah.
For Ryan, especially for the younger people, I was the mental health boy as well, but then that kind of turned into baby Buddha or baby Yoda or something like that. People start to become more receptive, more open to it. So just know that that changes and it gets better.
Yeah, the mental health girls should be the most popular girl in school, in my opinion. And I'm definitely going to embrace that in myself. I vow to be the mental health girl in my world as well. Something that all of you together have inspired in me is this key takeaway is you saw something that you wanted to change and you took action. You did something about it. Something that made you.
And the adults are not always the answer.
Yeah, you're your own answer. Is
Absolutely.
what I get from all of you. So Once again, thank you all, Clayton. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, everybody that has been watching this. And thank you for all your comments that I've been looking at. The highlights over here have been amazing. This was a great conversation. I am going to pass it off back to our host to close it out for today. But thank you all so much and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for another inspiring panel. I appreciate that we talked about this in this specific way with all of these great activists, that are taking action, and they're not just watching, they're doing something. As Anna said in the end, I think it's admirable, and I think it's something that everybody can get inspired from and do something in their small little way. So thanks again for watching. If you like this video, like it, subscribe to our channel, share it with your friends, because more people should hear about this. And then a couple of reminders. This live show is part of our Grow You schedule of 15 live online classes that we host every week. And so stay tuned for new things happening even later today and the rest of the week. And I wanted to share the schedule again. See if anything picks your eye. We'll put the link in the chat to get so that you can enroll yourself in any of these classes for this week. If you're into coaching, there is a great session Thursday and a couple other really good sessions on feelings like some of the ones we talked about today. Tomorrow morning, a session on shame and empathy and resilience. And we're going to keep going tomorrow with navigating challenges and this whole topic of navigating emotion. What does that mean? If you're curious about that, check out that session. And yeah, thank you so much. And if you would like to support us, like, subscribe, share. See you next week.
If this was helpful, would you please comment, like, share, and subscribe? The Emotional Intelligence Network is your community to grow and practice EQ. At 6 seconds, that means being smarter with feelings. And we're here to provide practical, proven EQ tools so workplaces, schools, and people can thrive everywhere in the world. Be sure to visit 6seconds.org to find the complete suite of resources, assessments, and programs. Thank you for watching.